Well, so the first question we ask everybody is, why IMSA? Why did you come to IMSA back there in, that would have been what? 5?
Yeah, 5.
Yeah, 2005.
Yeah, I imagine that my story is a lot like a lot of other alumni stories, that I didn't feel challenged at my, regular high school. I came from a very rural area. I grew up in a town of 950 people.
Where?
In north central Illinois.
Okay.
So out west of here.
Yeah. What town?
A town called Shabana.
Oh, well, we know Shabana. Yes. Yeah.
And I didn't really feel like I belonged very much socially. I had skipped 4th grade as a kid, so I was always kind of marked as, she's the smart kid, she's kind of different, and never really fit in that much socially, especially after skipping the grade.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and so how did you hear about IMSA?
I had actually heard about IMSA from my grade school music teacher.
Oh, wow.
So when I was in 1st or 2nd grade, I think one of her kids had come or had at least applied, and she said to my mom at parent-teacher conferences, I know of this school, you should think about it for Rachel in the future. So it had kind of for a long time been in the back of my mind and my mom's mind.
Okay, well that's interesting. Yeah. And you applied and got in? Yeah, excellent. So casting your eye back there to the fall of '05, what were some of your first impressions?
That's a good question. It's hard to remember.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What the first thoughts were. I remember it seemed huge, and the idea that there were 650 students here, that seemed enormous to me.
I can imagine the comparison.
The comparison. It seems so huge, and big and confusing, and maze-like. I think a lot of students have the impression like everybody here is so smart and they're all smarter than me, and so I had that kind of normal reaction, but I was so excited.
Cool.
I had kind of no doubts in my mind that it was a good choice for me.
Good. So, did you get to know other kids fairly quickly, or?
I feel like it. Yeah. I had a really good roommate.
Okay.
Randomly assigned to me sophomore year, but then we stayed roommates throughout IMSA.
Oh, cool.
So we were a really, really great match.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, what are some of the things that you can remember about residential life, just in general, not just the first impressions necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, especially my sophomore year, I had a really great RC, whose name was a certain Julie Dowling.
Oh, interesting.
She was my RC, yep. And I have so many fond memories of res life. Goofy things like, grilled cheese after 10 check and things like that. I still have to go and ask if 06C has Franken-tree. We had this Christmas tree that was many different trees all cobbled together, and we had to tie it up to the wall.
Yes.
And Christmas decorations that were about as old as we were, and but it was endearing and fun, and
yeah. You should check that out.
Yeah.
So you were in what, C-wing?
C-wing, yeah. About 6.
Yeah. Wow. Had IMSA started Clash of the Halls in those days?
We had, yeah. I think I've been going a few years by that point.
Yeah.
I didn't participate a lot in Clash of the Halls.
Okay.
I kind of went around with the group, but I wasn't kind of a huge participant in a lot of the normal things. I spent a lot of time while I was here doing music things and some of the smaller clubs.
Yeah. Okay. What kind of what music did you do?
I was in the band. I played flute. Flute and some piccolo. But I had taken private music lessons before, and so I did a lot of the solo and ensemble competitions and things like that.
Cool. Do you still play?
Not really. I really should. But that kind of got lost by the wayside in grad school.
Yeah. Grad school will do that.
Yeah.
So, did you enjoy the music?
I did. yeah. And that was, I feel like, a big part of my identity while I was here.
Yeah.
You know, and I did some of the little extra performances. Like, I think around Christmas time, they had people go play by the Kaleidoscope.
Oh, yeah.
And had like a little midday concert there, and some of those kind of things.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I think in the yearbook, weren't you most likely to become a musician?
I think so, yes, which is apparently not true, but.
Well, I think most of those are not.
Yeah.
And they're a comment on the moment, not on the future.
Yeah. I had very fond memories of doing the madrigals.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if they still do that. I don't think they do. The Christmas performances,
so.
yeah.
Did you sing? Or?
No. I ended up eventually leading the recorder group who would play during dinner and while the singers were getting ready and things like that. And so we had this recorder kind of between a quartet and a group of 8. Kind of played Baroque music. And,
Nice. Those were always very nice.
Yeah.
What other kind of extra or co-curricular things did you do?
Yeah, I did French club, and I really enjoyed that.
Right.
I remember crepe night every year, and we'd make thousands of crepes.
Yep.
And every year it was a struggle, finding kitchens and hot plates, and trying to do that when you're in the dorms. And trying to convince the members of French club to not make pancakes.
Yes, there's a huge difference.
Yes. But when you're just beginning, it's very easy to accidentally make pancakes.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like I've forgotten a lot of that.
Yeah.
We had a fencing club that I really enjoyed.
Wow.
But it was hard to get, the staff support and supervision and things like that for that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So what about academics? What are some of the memories you have from the academics?
So many little things. And especially this year, a lot of the history stuff has been coming back to me.
Oh, I bet.
I have very strong memories of Dr. Victory's class.
Yes.
How frightening it all was coming in as a sophomore, and he was very, intense and serious, had very high expectations of all of us. I remember the computers in the back of the room and how we'd, work in pairs on his data sets, and how kind of the ultimate demonstration of your knowledge in his class was that you'd make a graph with an image in the background and a quote on the front. And I remember making loads and loads of those.
Yes.
Coming in here to record reminded me of French classes and having to do kind of the oral video exams and things like that. Yeah, I have a lot of fond memories from French classes.
Good. Did you have both of the French teachers?
I did, yeah. Madam Schultz and Madam Crosby.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and I figured you were probably going to ask me what my favorite class was. And I was thinking, how do I, compare, or what would it be? I kind of ultimately came to French classes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a different experience at IMSA.
Yeah.
Right, that you can kind of be yourself and be a little sillier and,
Yeah, and what's so effective about the immersion technique is that the language becomes what it really ought to be, a means of expressing something you want to say.
Yeah. And I don't know what they do anymore, but in French classes at the time, we weren't allowed to write anything in French 1 for the first month. Right, because spelling French is so challenging.
Right.
And if you don't see any of it written, and you're just hearing it, you can't start pronouncing all of the silent letters in French.
Right.
So I remember for about the first month, our homework was always, go home and practice for 15 minutes. But I think that was incredibly effective and really gave me a different appreciation for the language.
Yeah, I bet. And it'll stay with you. Even if you don't use it and you forget it, it comes back very quickly. I think at least that's been my experience with languages. So yeah, good. So how did you manage the math and science dimension here?
I very quickly realized that science wasn't going to be my thing. I had come in thinking, I want to be a scientist. I thought maybe chemistry, maybe biology, certainly not physics. But what was his name? Was it Dr. Dodds? Yeah. I had Dr. Dodds for MSI, for methods of scientific inquiry.
Right.
At the time, he was nearing retirement.
Right.
I'm sure he was not teaching the class kind of the set syllabus. But he spent a lot of time talking about his career and his life as a scientist. In listening to him, I think he was talking about grant proposals.
Oh, fun.
And all the times he was in the lab at 3 a.m. and I decided, nope, this is not for me. You know, probably like October of my sophomore year.
Wow.
But much better to realize that
Oh,
in
yeah.
high school, right?
Right,
Than
right.
in college after
Yeah.
you've taken out student loans and all
Yeah.
that. So I enjoyed a lot of my science classes, but from that point on, I thought, I don't know if this is my thing. Math I kind of did because I had to. I wasn't particularly good or bad at it.
Okay.
You know, I could just kind of go through the process and it was fine. But
you managed it fine.
yeah. And I had some science classes I really liked. Joan Traina's EBE was the abbreviation we had for it. Ecology, environment, botany, something like that.
Yeah.
Evolution,
Right.
something to that effect. And that was a really fun class.
Cool.
A lot of people didn't like it.
Yeah.
But we went bird watching. He had all these skeletons, and we talked about evolution and how you can see the little like fingers left in the whale fins. And so I did really enjoy some of my science classes.
Yeah,
But
good. Yeah, good. But for you, the humanities were the...
yeah, those were kind of the highlight.
Right.
Especially French classes. English classes I also really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine that I would become a historian. History classes weren't always my favorite at IMSA.
Right.
You know? I certainly wish that I paid much better attention in Lee Esterlett's political theory class.
Ah, yes.
I never imagined I would become a political historian.
Well, there you go.
That was, I think, probably the last choice of history class I'd put down.
Yeah. So was that political theory, was that your senior elective?
Yeah, that was my senior elective.
Did you take another history elective?
No. That year, Chris Colburn did a linguistics class.
Ah.
Yeah, so that was really interesting.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Wow. Well, did you do any traveling with IMSA students at all?
None of the kind of regular intercession trips or things like that. I was my junior year a lead facilitator, and then I became one of the 2 coordinators of the whole lead program.
Wow.
My senior year, and you could tell today that I'm but they took us on a conference. The coordinators of LEAD and what was then Synergy, if you remember that.
Yep.
So they took the 4 of us, seniors, to present at a conference in Arizona.
Oh, nice.
And it was Bob and Adrian who took us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So we flew down there and we're there for a couple days for this conference, and it was a kind of collegiate leadership conference thing that we presented about our programs at.
So what about LEAD attracted you?
That's a really good question. I have no idea.
Okay.
I think I applied my junior year because my roommate did.
Okay.
But then I found I was good at it and I enjoyed it. And I mean, it's like with teaching now, like I'm naturally a pretty quiet person, but being in front of a classroom is kind of a different performative aspect.
Right.
And I really enjoyed it, and I had a really good co-facilitator that year.
Okay.
And we got on really well and did, had a good time. And so I wanted to kind of go on with it.
Yeah. So it was really sort of the teaching aspect of it that really caught you.
Yeah, it was.
Interesting. What do you think you took away from your time here at IMSA?
So much. I mean, IMSA was what got me interested in teaching. I always kind of had an interest in it, but thinking about pedagogy in the way that we do here, even if we don't kind of expressly come out and say it, but thinking about what makes learning and thinking about how people learn and what are some different ways of doing that. And I remember at the time, that was when the SSLs were really big.
Oh, yes.
And I remember in class having to point to the SSLs that we'd accomplished in class, especially in French classes we had to do this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, interesting.
And now nobody knows what the SSLs are, but they were a very central part of my experience at IMSA.
So did the French teacher translate the SSLs to French for you?
I think that was one of the few times we did it in English.
Oh, okay.
Because
I can't imagine how they would translate into any language.
Probably very
Other than
badly.
English, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think IMSA, as probably many people would say, let me be myself more.
Right.
and let me be, not afraid to be myself, and follow my interests and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly made the college experience feel very different to me than it did to a lot of my peers.
I bet. And it must have been an adjustment to get ready for all, to actively engage in a lecture.
Yeah, I suppose. I was lucky to be in an Irish program in college.
Okay.
So we had a lot of our core classes as a kind of great books program.
Oh, okay.
Which felt very kind of IMSA-ish.
Right. What college did you go to?
I went to Boston College.
Boston College, that's right. Yeah. Very nice. Well, you know what? There's no reason why we shouldn't talk a little bit about now that you are teaching here at IMSA.
Yeah.
So let me go back to that first question. Why IMSA again?
Why IMSA again? I had been on the job market for a couple of years, and as you know, in history, the job market is very difficult.
Yes, to say the least.
Yes. And I had been postdocing at Notre Dame and then at the University of Missouri. I had postdocs. And they're both great schools, and I got to teach some really fun classes. But the attention that was paid to students was so much less. Especially at the University of Missouri, a big kind of state school. I felt like there were a lot of students falling through the cracks, just in the system, not getting the help they need and the support, things like that. So I had started thinking, maybe I want to do something a little more teaching focused. And then while I was in grad school, I had also worked at the Center for Teaching and Learning at Notre Dame. And so I'd done some work with pedagogy there and leading pedagogy workshops and things like that. And so that was one of my kind of strengths on the job market, right, is that I had this stronger background in pedagogy than most college professors do.
A lot of them don't have any.
Right. Having something was much more than usual.
Right.
So I was starting to look at places like IMSA, and I'd always kind of thought like, maybe if there's a job, but starting to look at places that really took teaching seriously. But I still wanted to be able to have some room to do research.
Right.
And IMSA offers that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because those are exactly the reasons why I came to IMSA way back when. I was teaching at UIC at the time. And there are people up in those back rows in those big lecture halls, but what they're doing actually, you haven't the foggiest.
Yeah. And I felt like my colleagues, they were impressed when I didn't just lecture the whole time.
Right.
It's like this should be normal.
Right.
If it's a 30-person class, you don't have to lecture the whole time.
No, I would agree.
Yeah, and colleagues thinking I was kind of silly for caring about teaching.
Yeah.
Right? Like, do the bare minimum and...
Only the content matters.
Yeah.
No, I like I said, I had the same reaction, and that's part of the reason I came here. So, what have been some of your first impressions as a new teacher here?
That's an interesting question. You asked about coming here in the first place. It struck me how much the building was the same. I have a story for you.
Oh, good.
There's, in Pearson Lecture Hall,
right.
On Community Day, I was in there for a presentation, and they were using the screen, and I noticed a spot on the screen, a stain on it. And I know where that stain is from. It's from an ADVIS class, which would have been in the fall of 2006, I guess, when Branson Lawrence, who was then teaching that class, who liked to explode things, as you know, decided for a Halloween demonstration that he would explode a pumpkin.
Oh, no.
And so he exploded the pumpkin in the front of the lecture hall, and the pumpkin went up and hit the screen and left this big orange stain. And that stain persists to this day.
I love it.
Yeah, I feel like it needs a little plaque, memorial stain to...
Yeah, absolutely.
It strikes me how much I can relate to the students, which is probably, makes sense. But so many things I see in them, I kind of felt all the same things. Some things are different.
Oh, yeah.
Of course. I think students have new stresses and challenges. I feel like it's kind of cliche to say, but, technology is different. They're coming from schools in Illinois that have had nearly 20 years of No Child Left Behind standardized testing, and certain things like that are different.
Right. And I don't know, cell phones weren't ubiquitous in your day, were they?
No, I had a cell phone at IMSA, but I left it in my desk, like in my dorm room, just to call my mom on occasion.
Right.
But we also still had the phone in our room.
Right.
Yeah, and when I came in as a sophomore, we didn't have the one-to-one computing.
Right.
So I remember my victory summatives, right? Because they weren't essays, they were summatives. I remember trying to do that, saving to a floppy drive.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the other kids had flash drives.
Ah, yes.
But I had never heard of a flash drive until I came to IMSA.
Ah, yeah, okay.
So trying to, save your web page to a floppy drive didn't work particularly well.
No, I can imagine. I can imagine. Wow, it would have been slow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And continually running out of space.
Yeah.
So a lot of the technological thing is a bit different today.
Yep, I would agree.
But
so, have you had any sort of surprises or challenges?
I don't know if there's big surprises.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of it has been kind of how I expected.
Right.
I mean, challenges. I mean, I suppose that I didn't realize quite how different IMSA students coming in were from one another. And maybe this is something I took for granted, or maybe it's something that's been changing, but kids coming with very, very different levels of preparation.
Yeah.
Right, and this semester I'm teaching all American Studies.
Right.
So I'm seeing right now 40% of the sophomore class.
Wow.
And seeing just the vast differences in what they're coming into IMSA with, and trying to get them all on the same page.
And just so you know, that's nothing new.
Yeah, I didn't think it was.
No,
yeah.
It's been that way from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in history. Writing skills, reading comprehension skills.
Yeah, and now we're down with one semester of American Studies.
Yes, which is a real shame.
Yeah, trying to get anywhere with that.
Yeah. Yikes. No, the other teachers, well, that's for another time, but anyway. So you've already talked a little bit about this, but maybe you could expand on how your experiences as a student has influenced your teaching.
Yeah. It's not the most fun topic, but I really, really emphasize mental health with my students. And I was very gratified that one even wrote on my student surveys that their parents had told them that I talked about it at Parents' Day. But I think especially based on my experiences here as a student, I know what a problem and a challenge that can be, especially for sophomores transitioning, but throughout IMSA. And I had some experiences here as a student that made me particularly kind of, attentive to that. Kind of in more fun terms. I mean, I try to, put together lots of activities and I kind of already know what the IMSA way is of teaching. And I think perhaps better than some of my colleagues, I realize what sticks with you. It's not always what the teacher wants to stick with you.
No, that's always the case, I think.
And knowing that, this activity might not stick with any of the kids but one. But that can still be very important. And it's certainly given me an appreciation of how smart students are here, even if they don't come in with the best preparation. Knowing what they can be.
Yeah, and the differences in skill levels is often a function of the school the kids come out of, rather than the kids themselves.
Yeah. And how much growth some will have while they're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any sort of last comments on your IMSA experience, either then or now? Some memories that have bubbled up that would be fun to add, or?
I can't think of anything big.
Okay. Well, it doesn't have to be big. Little is often much more interesting anyway.
Yeah, I mean, recently, kind of as I've been, getting older and seeing my classmates go on to do amazing things, I'm struck by how many of the kids who were, goofy and irresponsible are now, psychiatrists and, doctors of various sorts. And, just realizing how much we grew while we were at IMSA.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
It's been great to talk.